beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Crystal, this is Born Book Reviews, and today it is time to do our March and April wrap up. I used to do video wrap ups where I would do vlog style and I would get to you as soon as I finished the book and tell you how I felt. However, lately I've been finishing books as I'm driving on the road or I am in bed in the middle of the night, because that's the only time that I really get a chance to read is when I'm driving on the train or in my bed. And they're not great times for me to be able to whip out and film a automatic update. And so I was not doing it, and then it just wasn't happening. So I've decided to go back to my old fashioned kind of stand in front of a camera and tell you what I thought of my books. But what I've been doing is jotting down a note of what I thought in that moment, and then I can kind of like remember to be able to talk to you about it at the end of the month. So because I was planning on doing vlog style in March, I have to tell you about March and April's books. So we'll be here for a little while, so grab yourself a cup of coffee, tea, whatever you drink, settle in. Let's talk about what I read in the month of March and April. We will start this video by talking about the fun statistics because I got a new reading tracker. I'm obsessed. So we'll do the fun statistics at the start for anyone who's interested in those type of things. But I will timestamp it down below. So if you want to jump straight into the books and what I thought of them, then you can head to there. But if you want to hear the fun little statistics, I will do the statistics for March and April, and then I will jump into the books and what I thought for March and April. So let's dive into the statistics for March. I have my handy little book here because if I didn't, I would forget it all. So in March, I read a total of 8 books. That was a total of 2,321 pages, and I listened to a total of 69.5 hours of audiobook. Because I do a lot of like immersion reading where I read and listen at the same time, I calculate both the pages read and the audio listened. That's just how it kind of broke down this month. My genre breakdown, I had 3 fantasy, 1 horror, 2 romance, 1 thriller, and 1 dystopian. And from those, 1 was a debut author, 6 were new to me authors, and 1 was an author that I had read from before. And I sourced these books in terms of like how I consumed them. 5 was mixed media where I physically read it as well as listened to it. 2 were just audio alone, and 1 was just ebook alone. 2 were from indie published authors, and 6 were for traditionally published books. And the audience for these 4 were for adult, 3 were for YA, and 1 was a middle grade story. Of these, 5 were part of a series and 3 were standalones. So, you know, starting a new series, because why not? The way that I acquired these, 3 were from bookstore or purchased, 2 were from KU, 1 was from my library, 1 was from Libra FM because I'm a part of the Libra FM advanced listener copies, and 1 was from a publisher where they had provided it to me to read and review. Now for the ratings of these. I had 3 5 stars, 1 4.5 star, 2 4 stars, 1 3 star, and 1 1.5 star, which was an average rating of 4 across the month, and I did have 1 DNF. Then we get into April. So for April, I read 6 books, which was a total of 1,420 pages, and a total listening of 55.5 hours of audiobook. The genre breakdown for this, we had 2 fantasy, 1 mystery, 1 non-fiction, 1 romance, and 1 sci-fi. So I am kind of discovering that I'm a very eclectic reader when I start to look at this. So if you're new here, hi. I don't have one particular style that I like to read, so hopefully I can tickle something that you fancy. That sounded really wrong. Anyways, from those, 2 were debut authors, or 2 were debut novels, 3 were new to me authors, and 1 I had read from before. The source, 2 were audiobooks, and 4 were a mixture of audio and physical. 4 were traditionally published, 1 was self-pub, and 1 was indie pubbed. All 6 were made for adults only. We acquired these 1 through Audible, 3 through my bookstore, and 2 through my library, and 3 were series and 3 were standalone. So it was a good little split this month. Of my ratings, much better. We had 3 5 star, 1 4.5 star, 1 4 star, and 1 3.5 star for an average rating of 4.5. So definitely had a better reading month in April than I did in March. So let's jump into the books that I read in March. I'm going to tell you what I read, what I rated it, a little bit about it, and what I liked and didn't like about it. That's kind of like the end that I'll follow. So first off in the month, this is I think in order of how I read them. It's just how it's in my reading tracker, and that's usually as I start a book, I put it in the reading tracker. It may not necessarily be in order if I finished them though, because sometimes I'll do multiple books at the same time. So it's in order of when I started them. So the first book in the month of March was Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. I gave this 5 stars. You can see it up there facing you. This was a surprising read for me. We follow a story of 2 fathers. Their children are both gay. They're in a relationship together. They're both brutally murdered, and then so these 2 fathers who are ex-cons take it upon themselves to find out who is behind their son's murders. And then this leads to this epic kind of like, I will find you, I will kill you story that was just so engrossing, and I absolutely loved the representation and the adventure and the characters, and just like I felt like I was there with those fathers, like feeling their emotion along with them, whether it was anger in the moment, whether it was sadness and guilt, like whatever it was, I felt it wholeheartedly. It was fantastically written, and I know it had like a little bit of a moment when it first came out, but I have not heard a lot of people talk about it since, and I definitely think if this is one that has been on your TBR for a while and you've been like hesitantly waiting to pick it up, do it. You will not regret it. Next up, we did The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas. This is a middle grade horror, I guess you would call it. We follow a ghost that appears up to a high school student, and he's kind of trying to, it's so hard to describe this without giving things away. Pretty much there was a school shooting that happened, and the person that is responsible for this school shooting has since died, and his ghost is now trying to harm our main character, Jake Livingston. And there's things going down. It's just very, very cool, very like spooky vibes. I definitely think that it's the middle grade horror, kind of more on the YA side. Definitely lots of like trigger warnings and content that is a little bit on the darker side, so definitely look into that. I'm sorry if the camera angle has changed. I got a video call I got a call from my plumber, so I had to take the call because I record on my phone. So I think I was talking about The Taking of Jake Livingston. As I said, trigger warnings, check them out, but all in all, 5-star read, phenomenal, spooky vibes. Good for anyone who's looking for that. In the cooler months, I definitely would recommend reading it, not during summer. Next up, we had Meet Cute Diary by Emery Lee. Again, another 5-star read. This follows a trans main character who has a online Meet Cute journal where they take their own life experiences and turn it into meet cutes that has happened between trans characters. And someone comes along and claims that this meet cute is fake and the whole thing is not right. And so our main character decides to force their own meet cute and end up in a relationship that is fake dating with somebody who is also trans, to try and save face and save the website. They end up falling in love themselves, and then there's some other main characters that involved in the story that are learning about their own gender identities, and it's just really, really great representation. I felt very, very educated through a lot of things. There was things that I didn't realize about the queer community that was definitely very well represented in this story. So I think that both people in the queer community as well as allies will really, really enjoy this story because it's not only representative but also educational. So I think it was fantastically done. You fall in love very much with your main character and the story. So and it's a quick, easy, digestible read. So definitely gave that one 5 stars. Then everything just went downhill and we read Redeeming Aries by L.P. Pierce. I read this because I had to read a book with a crustacean on the cover for Pokemon, and I knew that the second book in this series had a crustacean on the cover, so my plan was to read book 1, then book 2, and cover that prompt. I DNF'd book 1. I gave it like 1.5 stars, and that's being generous. The writing in this was the worst. Like, I read trashy romance. I read trashy books all the time that are horribly written, and I expect them to be horribly written, and it's fine because the plot is interesting or the characters are cool, and you know that it's just going to be a shitty ride, and you're not expecting a literary masterpiece. This didn't have any of that going for it. It was so badly written. It was undigestible. I hated the main character. I didn't believe in the love at all, and it was just so not what I was expecting. It was just no. Like, I have pretty low standards when it comes to romance, and yeah, I just think that this was just not, I can't really say much else. I'm sorry. And I know it's someone's baby, and I know they worked really hard on it, so I hate saying anything negative about someone who is self-published and has worked really hard on their thing. And there is a lot of books in this series, so obviously there's people out there that love it. It just was not for me. I think I went into it expecting to love it as much as I loved Ice Planet Barbarians or Choosing Theo, or like something else in that vein where it's a monster alien type main love interest, and that's just not what I got, unfortunately. But then we had a redeeming one, and we read Pestilence by Laura Thalassa, I think is how you pronounce the surname. This has recently been published mainstream, but it was independently published when I read it. This was a 4-star read. This follows one of the key 4 horsemen, and it's Pestilence. He's coming and he's creating a plague throughout the world. He's traveling from continent to continent. He's currently in the Canadian-American area, and there is a woman who has decided to self-sacrifice herself and try and kill Pestilence. As she does so, she discovers that he is indestructible. You cannot kill him, and instead of killing her, he takes her hostage and carries her around with him to continue his plague vendetta. Of course, forced proximity, love induces. He is the biggest. I would like to say he is the morally grey golden retriever that we all need. I don't know if those two can be together as one, but they seriously are. Obviously there's some trigger warnings with this, like think about there's gonna be some horrible things in here, and there's definitely some like brutal graphic scenes, and there is death of an animal, so just like bear that in mind. But all in all, I had a really good time with this. One of my girlfriends at work had read it and was like, you need to read this, you'll really love it. And then I did. I had a really good time. It was 4 stars. Then we picked up a dystopian called Breathe by Sarah Crossan. This was one that was on my back list, and this followed a story of a world in which all of the trees have been cut down. There is no ability to breathe in the world, except there is this dome, and within this dome they have created this like special world where you get to live and breathe as normal. However, there was like a lottery to determine who ended up in the dome and who ended up protected, and there is a group of people who are trying to prove that Earth is actually inhabitable and try and grow trees outside again. It's kind of like this dystopian post-world like thing. All in all, I had a really good time with the first 50% of this book. Where it lost me was the second half of the book. Once they actually ended up out in the Earth side, real side of the world, and ended up kind of coming in contact with another group that was the people that were in charge of the vendetta, it just kind of fell a little bit flat for me, and I started to feel like there was a lot of character growth that could have been developed around some of the characters that wasn't. Some of our characters that were side characters probably could have had a bigger like development in them and like found out a bit more of them. And I also feel like there was not a lot of world development. So we were kind of thrust into this society that had become dystopian, but there wasn't a lot of history as to how it became, and that kind of bugged me. And there wasn't a lot of discussion about how this resistance group came to be, and I know that it is only a duology, so the second book like probably isn't going to go into too much of that because it's going to be all about like the resolution of things. So I feel like this first book had more opportunity to build things up and it didn't, so I probably won't be continuing the series with that. I gave it 3 stars. It was a good time. I didn't hate it, but it definitely fell off in the second half for me. Then we finished a series and we read The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. I gave this 4.5 stars. It was not my favorite of the 5, but it was definitely great to see this series wrapped up and have a really good time with it. I recommend this to so many people. This is an amazing middle grade series that I think more and more people need to read. He is the be-all end-all amazing main character, and the things and adventures that he gets up to are so exciting. This one was action-packed from woe to go. It was almost difficult to keep up because there was so much going on, but I had a really good time with it. It had been a big gap between me reading the 4th book and the 5th book, so I had to like thrust back in and remember who the characters were, but the author does a really good job of doing it in a way that it doesn't take much for you to get back into the world. And then the last book that I read for the month was Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. I gave this one 4 stars. I impulsively picked this up because Britt from Brittany Loves Reading and Brie from 4 Paws in a Book decided to impulsively read this on sprints, and I was like, you know what, I'll get in on that. And yeah, I had a really good time with it. It was my first Tessa Bailey, And I didn't think that golf could be sexy, but it was. And I really loved our main love interests. I definitely believed in their story. It wasn't one of those ones that's going to be like super memorable and I'll like think about it every time I see it, I'll smile type thing. And I think that's why it falls to the 4-star, because it was okay. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't like a shout from the rooftops best romance I've ever read. So that's why it gets a 4-star. Now let's jump into the books that I read for April. So in April, as I said, I read 6 books. So it was not as big a month as March, but I still had a really, really good time. The first book that I finished was Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. This was a 5-star read for me. This was another Brie recommendation, or Brie made me do it, however you want to look at it. So although Brie can't trust me when it comes to recommendations, I can certainly trust her. So this was a 5-star. This follows a rivalry between 2 poets where they find out that their teacher, who's been kind of pitting them against each other, is a vampire. I kind of was like, enough said. It was very dark academia, which I didn't think I would like, but the dark academia element of it was not the forefront, and the fantasy element like kind of came through. And because it was such a character driven story, and I really, really liked the main characters, it kind of was okay that it was dark academia. So I hadn't read anything by S.T. Gibson before, but I definitely will be reading more because I really, really enjoyed this book. Then we finished Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Things by Matthew Perry. Unfortunately, I gave this 3.5 stars. This was just not good. I feel like it was very repetitive. It was really nice to, you know, hear some of his success stories and hear some of the challenges that he had overcome, and it was nice to kind of see, you know, how troublesome it was for him, but it was also really bad to see behind the curtain. I'm not gonna lie, I regret reading it because now I can't watch Friends in the same way, because I see in this season when he has a goatee, it's because he was on this, and it just kind of like ruined the episodes a little bit for me, because now I can't like watch it without knowing what I've read. So like, if you want to remember Matthew Perry for that instead of this, I wouldn't bother reading it now. Next, we read Flawless by Elsie Silver. This was for a read-along hosted by Chloe and Britt, and I gave this one 5 stars. It made me cry. I did not expect this romance to make me cry. I knew it was going to be Sexy Cowboy. I expected to enjoy it. I expected it to be a 5-star, but it was like a almost 6-star, because I was a blubbering mess on the drive home finishing this book. The last, like, I don't think it was 50 pages, like the last probably 20 pages. And the way he did something at the end, if you've read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, was the most romantic scene I have ever read in a book in my life. It will stick with me for a long time. And a romance book hasn't done that in a while, so I just immediately had to give it 5 stars. And I've started the second one, and I can say that it's probably gonna be a 5-star too, because Daddy Cade, oh, yum. Next up, we read The Murder Wheel by Tom Mead. This was a 4.5 star. As you would have known, I read the previous book from Tom Mead a couple of months ago, gave it 5 stars, absolutely loved it. Death and the Conjurer is this what I'm talking about. This was the sequel to that. Now, you can read them as standalones, you don't have to read them like as part of the series, but because I had read the first one and then I read this, I was kind of inadvertently comparing it to the first one, and the enjoyment that I got from the first one was a lot more than the second. I think the intricacy and the planning of the plot line for the second one was so cool, and like the way he thought about it was really awesome, but the answer to one of the problems, like the solution and what actually caused it, was a little bit disappointing for me, and I think that's where I had to pop off the 0.5 stars. But I still had a really, really good time. I am still going to read everything that this person ever releases. I think they are a fantastic thriller writer, or I should say mystery writer, and if you like locked door mysteries, if you're a fan of Agatha Christie or like Sherlock Holmes novels, this is definitely a book for you. It is that old-fashioned locked door murder mysteries. He does it really, really well, really like researched and planned out, so you don't feel like there's a lot of plot holes, which I absolutely adored. Well, I personally didn't find them. Then I decided to buddy read How Does It Feel by Janine O'Reilly with one of the girls from work, and I gave this 4 stars. There's definitely some problematic things in this book. I am not going to lie to you. There is a sexual assault scene with a like tree borg, which is really uncomfortable to read. But the plot twist that everyone talks about, yes, it did make me gasp out loud, but it didn't take this book from a 3-star to a 5-star. It took it from a 3-star to a 4-star. I know for a fact that that person that I buddy read with has picked up the second book and was like, not worth continuing, so I'm not going to bother continuing the series. I had a good time while I was in it. I read it quickly. I think I finished it in like 2 days, 3 days, but all in all, 4 stars. It follows, I should actually tell you what it's about. It follows our main character who is a scientist, I guess you could say. She's a biologist, I believe, and she's really into mushrooms and saving a particular moth species. And so she ends up following and trying to find this like mushroom that she's going to be able to use to save this moth species. And she walks into a mushroom ring, which sends her to a fairy realm. And while she's down there, they believe that she's an assassin that's been sent to kill the king. And she is not, and she's trying to prove to them that she's not. And so they decide to put her through 3 trials while she's down there. If she can survive the 3 trials, then she gets to go home. That's pretty much the plot line. I'm not going to tell you anymore because it'll spoil it. It was interesting. I had a good time. I'd probably only recommend it to certain people though. There's certain people that I know that would hate this. Just because of writing style, main character, some really uncomfortable scenes that just aren't great and aren't a good depiction of certain situations, and they're not necessarily relevant to the plot line, so it's probably would bug some people. So just look at those content warnings, of course. And then the last one that I finished for the month of April was Choosing Theo by Victoria Avellina. This was recommended to me by Britt from Brittany Loves Reading. Can you see that all my recommendations are coming from Britt and Brie at the moment? Clearly they're just like totally influencing my life, because most of my mood reads that I've picked up have been because of them. And this follows a main character who has been kidnapped from Earth, ends up on an alien spaceship, very similar to Ice Planet Barbarians, except they eject her from the spaceship to land on another alien planet. When she comes out, she tries to escape from whoever has tried to kidnap her and ends up being taken in by a race and a town within this alien planet, where the rules are, if anyone from Earth is ever discovered, they have to live for a whole year with them in their town before they're allowed to leave and go wherever they want. And they have to legally marry one of the alien race, but their marriage, the way that it works is it's a 3-month trial to determine whether or not you think they're worthy of being your mate or having children with. Anyways, obviously she ends up in a forced marriage with this guy named Theo, and the whole story is about her becoming enemies to lovers situation. Obviously they end up mated. Like it's a pretty self-explanatory story. I'm not spoiling anything. If you've read anything like this before, you know how this is going to go. But I had a really good time with this. Theo is so good. He is like my new book boyfriend. I think he's fantastic. And I definitely think that if you loved Ice Planet Barbarians, you should read this book. It feels very much like the world of Ice Planet Barbarians, but 300 years in the past, like when the technology that the Ice Planet Barbarian peoples used to have is in existence. And they very much are very similar, but less prehistoric, I guess. They're more advanced in their civilization. So it feels like them either like well in the future when they've like redeveloped, or before the plague. So yeah, I definitely think you should read that if you liked Ice Planet Barbarians. So there you have it. They're the books that I read in March and April. If you have made it this far, make sure you like, comment and subscribe to help this channel grow. And if you're feeling chatty and want to drop something in the comments, you can drop a mushroom emoji in the comments down below. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend and happy reading. Bye.